What would you do if the cheapest place in the mountains came with a locked hatch no one had mentioned, and the only living soul who seemed to understand what waited beneath it was your dog? The cabin had been listed with 3 crooked photographs, 1 line of description, and a warning so vague it sounded almost lazy: structure sold as is, road access unreliable in winter, no guarantee of utilities, no history provided. That was enough to keep decent buyers away, which was exactly why the retired soldier bought it. He did not buy it because he believed in fresh starts, and he did not buy it because he liked old wood or mountain silence, or the fantasy of fixing something with his hands after a life spent breaking under things he could not explain. He bought it because it cost $300, because Snow Country had a way of hiding men who no longer wanted to be found, and because the German shepherd beside him had begun waking every night at exactly 3:17, staring into corners of rented rooms as if he could hear something his handler could not. The winter road up to the property was little more than 2 ruts cut through white drifts and frozen mud, and by the time the truck climbed the final ridge, daylight had already gone thin and gray. The cabin waited in a clearing like a bad memory somebody had nailed together and forgotten, half buried in snow, roof bowed in the middle, chimney leaning just enough to make a man notice it twice. The dog rose in the passenger seat before the engine even died, ears forward, chest tight, not excited, not afraid, but alert in that deep old way that meant instinct had gone to work before thought could catch it. If you believe stories of loyalty, survival, and the kind of rescues that begin long before anyone knows they need saving, then this journey on Storm Rescue Tales is for you. The soldier stepped out into a wind so cold it felt metallic in his lungs, and for a moment he just stood there with one gloved hand on the truck door, listening. Nothing moved. No chains tapping against a porch rail, no distant engine, no birds, no animal tracks fresh enough to matter. Only the long hiss of winter crossing the trees and the small sound of the dog landing in snow beside him. The cabin sat at the edge of a narrow drop where the mountain fell away into dark timber and stone, and beyond that the storm front pressed low against the horizon, a wall of coming white. It was the sort of place that should have felt abandoned. Instead it felt occupied by silence itself, and there was a difference. The soldier knew that difference because war had taught it to him. He moved carefully to the porch, boots grinding ice, shoulders square despite the ache that had long ago settled into one knee and never left. The dog did not follow his usual pattern. Normally he ranged, circling the perimeter, checking doors, windows, scent lines, giving the place his own blunt approval before stepping inside. This time he stayed close enough that his shoulder brushed the man's leg once, then again, head low, nose working, eyes fixed on the dark seam beneath the cabin. It was the first warning, though the soldier would only understand that much later. The front door opened after 2 hard shoves and a strike from the heel of his boot. The smell that came out was old cold, wet timber, mouse rot, stale ash, and something deeper under all of it, something faint and mineral, like stone that had not seen daylight in a very long time. He stood in the doorway and swept the room with a flashlight. The beam found a rusted stove, a sink with no faucet handles, 2 chairs, a table warped by years of damp, and a narrow bed frame pushed under the far wall. Snow had blown in through gaps around the windows and lay across the floorboards in thin white lines. The place looked stripped, but not naturally stripped. It looked searched. A man who had spent enough years entering broken houses, ruined compounds, and places other men had fled in a hurry could see when absence had a shape. The dog crossed the threshold at last, but only after a pause so deliberate it made the soldier glance down. The shepherd moved past the table, past the stove, ignored the back corner where a normal dog would have investigated rodent scent, and stopped in the center of the room. Then he lowered his head toward the floorboards and went still. The soldier followed the line of his gaze. The boards there were darker than the rest. Not rotten. Replaced. He dragged the heel of his boot across them and heard a hollow note under the wood, a short dead thump unlike the solid age-stiff creaks of the surrounding floor. The dog's hackles lifted one careful ridge along his spine, not enough to show aggression, just enough to show certainty. The soldier did not reach down. He did not pry. Outside, the first hard flakes began striking the window like thrown grit, and training overruled curiosity. Shelter first. Heat second. Mystery after. He worked fast. He hauled in a toolbox, a sleeping bag, a jerrycan, a crate of canned food, and 2 bundles of dry split wood he had bought at the last station in town from a cashier who refused to make eye contact when he said the cabin address aloud. He sealed the worst gaps with plastic sheeting, cleared the stovepipe, coaxed flame out of old newspaper and kindling, and watched the room shift by degrees from dead to merely difficult. The dog never once left the center of the floor for long. Even when he obeyed a command and went to his blanket near the stove, his eyes stayed on the dark boards. By full night the storm had arrived for real. Wind slammed into the cabin walls in rolling bursts, and snow hissed down the chimney like dry sand whenever the fire weakened. The soldier sat on an upturned crate cleaning an old rifle more from habit than need while the dog lay in profile, motionless except for the faint rise and fall of breath. Men imagine loneliness is soft, like silence and distance and privacy. Real loneliness has edges. It sharpens every sound. It makes the house speak in small voices. It turns your own memory against you. As the room deepened into shadow beyond the firelight, the soldier's mind did what it always did when weather closed him in. It returned to the sound that had ended his old life, not the blast itself, but the seconds after, when radio chatter broke into screaming, when snow on a foreign ridge turned pink around boots that no longer moved, when the dog beside him had dragged him half-conscious from collapsing timber and burning fuel because no one else could reach him in time. They had both survived, which was the trouble. Survival had a way of leaving a debt behind, and debts looked for lonely men in lonely places. Near midnight the dog stood up so suddenly the soldier's hand jumped from the rifle to the knife at his belt. The shepherd faced the floorboards and gave one low sound from deep in his chest, not a bark, not even a growl exactly, more like a warning issued to something that had crossed a line. The soldier came to his feet. The cabin was locked. Windows sealed. Fire steady. Yet beneath the storm there it was, a sound from under the floor, soft but unmistakable, a metal knock, then another, as if something below had struck once, waited, then struck again. The soldier held his breath. Nothing. Wind. Fire. The blood thudding in his ears. Then 3 slow scratches from directly beneath the replaced boards. The dog backed one step, then surged forward, claws scraping wood, every muscle taut. Down! The man ordered, but even to his own ears the word came out rough. The shepherd obeyed halfway, crouched rather than settled, eyes burning into the floor. The soldier crossed the room, crouched, and pressed his palm to the dark boards. They were colder than the rest of the floor. Not winter cold. Underground cold. He found iron at the edge beneath a lip of wood, scraped away packed grime, and exposed a recessed ring handle black with age. A hatch. Locked from above with an old brass hasp and a padlock furred green at the edges. No one had mentioned a cellar. No one in town had said there was storage beneath the cabin, no water tank, no root space, nothing. Just before he could reach for the lock, the dog snapped his head toward the back wall and barked once with explosive force. The sound hit the room like a shot. Outside, something moved across the porch. Slow. Heavy. Then the cabin door, bolted from inside, shuddered under a hand that did not knock politely, but pressed, tested, and held. The soldier killed the lantern with one twist, and the room collapsed into red stove glow and darkness. Years fell back into place inside his body with terrifying ease. Pain left his bad knee. Thought narrowed. Breath slowed. The dog slid to the side of the door without another command, silent now, weight forward, ears rigid, every instinct distilled into one waiting point. Outside, the pressure on the handle eased, then returned, harder this time, enough to make the latch click inside the frame. Not random wind. Not an animal rubbing against wood. Someone was trying to feel whether the cabin was occupied without making the kind of noise that would start a fight too soon. The soldier stepped left of the doorway, rifle raised but low, not wanting the muzzle silhouetted if the door came in. He counted the seconds between each movement outside. That old part of his mind, the one he could never turn off, mapped possibilities. A hunter lost in the storm would shout. A desperate traveler would hammer and call for help. A man with decent intentions would bring a light. The figure outside did none of those things. The dog's lips peeled back soundlessly. The pressure stopped. A long half-minute passed. Then, from the side window instead of the porch, came the scrape of boots through snow. Whoever it was had moved around the cabin, staying close to the walls to avoid being seen against the white. The soldier tracked the sound, pausing near the corner where the room opened toward the back door. A shadow crossed the frost-blurred pane. Tall. Broad enough to be a man, too controlled to be panicked. Then a flashlight beam swept once across the glass, but not inward. It swept low, along the outside wall, as if looking for something hidden in the foundation. The soldier's gaze snapped to the hatch at the center of the floor. The dog saw it too and shifted, one glance to the boards, then back to the window. In war, danger announces itself in patterns long before faces appear. This was one of those moments. Whoever stood outside had not come because a light was burning. He had come because he knew where to look. The soldier moved to the window and, staying low, hooked 2 fingers into the curtain edge and pulled it aside a fraction. He caught a shape in the storm. Dark coat. Hood up. Flashlight tucked against the thigh to kill spill. The man outside was working with intention, tracing the lower seams of the cabin as if checking for a vent, a crawl space, a hidden access point. The soldier had just decided to open the door with the dog at heel and the rifle visible when the stranger stopped searching and turned his head directly toward the window, as if he had felt eyes on him. For one heartbeat the storm blew clear enough to reveal a pale face under the hood, narrow and sharp, beard iced white at the chin, mouth slightly open from the climb. Then the man lifted one gloved hand and pressed a finger to his own lips. Not a threat. Not a plea. A warning for silence. Before the soldier could react, the stranger jerked his attention toward the tree line uphill from the clearing. The dog caught it too. His ears pivoted hard. Somewhere beyond the cabin, faint through wind and dark, came the low mechanical cough of an engine idling with the lights off. The stranger moved fast then, stepping away from the window and vanishing into the storm without another look. The soldier was at the back corner in 2 strides, dropping to one knee near the floor and extinguishing the last visible flame from the lantern wick just in case any light remained. He fed the stove down until only a dull orange heart remained. The cabin sank into near darkness. Then he listened. At first there was nothing but weather. Then, cutting through in irregular pulses, came the crunch of more than one set of boots on snow. The dog went to the rear wall, nose high now, scenting air through the warped boards. 4, maybe 5 people if the staggered weight meant anything. Coming from the uphill side where the trees thickened and the old logging road must have looped behind the ridge. The soldier's mind returned to the last conversation he had endured in town before driving out. The property clerk at the courthouse had said the cabin had changed hands 3 times on paper in 12 years and never once been occupied for longer than a season. The cashier at the gas station had stared at the address and muttered that the road washed out easy. A mechanic tightening chains on the truck tires had looked up only once and asked whether the soldier believed in leaving old places alone. At the time it had all sounded like mountain superstition mixed with nosiness. In the dark with boots closing in and a locked hatch under the floor, it became something else. The dog returned to the center boards and stood over them, refusing to choose between the danger outside and the thing beneath the cabin. That decided it. The soldier knelt by the hatch, snapped bolt cutters onto the corroded padlock, and crushed through the metal in one hard squeeze. The brass hasp came free with a soft pop. He lifted the ring carefully. The hatch opened 3 inches and stopped, held by age or warped timber or something caught below. From the black seam that appeared, a draft rose so cold and damp it smelled like buried stone and old iron. The dog shoved his nose toward it, then recoiled just enough to tell the soldier there was something living in that darkness once, or recently, or still. Outside, a voice finally cut through the storm. "You in there?" Male, low, not calling for help, not announcing himself. Another voice answered from farther right, partly swallowed by wind. "Tracks fresh. Truck's here." The first voice again, nearer now. "Check the back." The soldier opened the hatch the rest of the way. Wooden steps descended into tight blackness. No light below. No sound except a distant drip, slow and steady. There was no time to evaluate. He gave one hand signal and the dog obeyed instantly, dropping into the dark first with no hesitation beyond the first step. The soldier followed, pulling the hatch down until only a finger-width crack remained above him. Darkness took everything. The cold below had weight. It settled against skin and slid under clothing in a way the surface storm had not. The soldier waited until his eyes adjusted to nothing, then used the smallest shielded beam from his flashlight, cupped in one hand. Stone walls. Rough cut, not poured. The narrow stairs ended in a chamber no bigger than a toolshed. Shelves lined one side, long stripped bare except for broken jars and rusted nails. The air smelled of mold, wet earth, and something medicinal that had long ago dried into the wood. The dog stood rigid at the far wall, staring not into the room but at another door set into the stone, iron-banded and far older than the cabin itself. Above, footsteps crossed the floorboards overhead. Slow. Exploring. A boot thudded near the stove. Another near the table. The soldier killed the light completely and let dark erase him. Voices filtered down through the boards, blurred but close. "He's been in here." "Find it." "No one said there'd be a dog." "Then quiet it if you have to." At that, the shepherd's entire body changed. He did not bark. He did not move. But the soldier could feel the old combat dog return, the one trained not merely to protect but to decide. Above them, something heavy scraped across the floor. Furniture moved. Boards kicked. Men searching. The soldier's hand found the dog's neck for half a second, grounding both of them. He leaned close to the iron-banded inner door. Behind it there was not silence, but a pressure of space, as if a tunnel lay beyond. On the wood at eye level someone had carved marks. Not initials. Not decoration. Tally lines. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Then the sound came from the other side of that door, so soft at first he almost mistook it for the drip of water, a human cough, weak and ragged, from somewhere deeper underground. Above them, the hatch ring creaked as hands on the cabin floor found it at last. The soldier did not think in words when the hatch above began to lift. He thought in geometry and timing, in angles and choke points and the distance between the first descending boot and the dog's jaws. The cellar stair was too narrow for 2 men abreast. Good. The chamber itself was too tight for gunfire without deafening everybody inside. Also good. But a fight below ground carried a danger older than bullets. In confined spaces men panicked fast, and panic turned everything stupid. The dog stood at the base of the steps, head low, shoulders broad in the dark, invisible until a sliver of storm light widened above them and outlined his ears in silver. One gloved hand appeared first on the hatch edge, then the toe of a boot testing the stair. The soldier rose from the wall and leveled the rifle upward. "1 more inch and you lose the hand," he said quietly. Silence snapped over the opening. The boot froze. For a moment all he heard was the wind pouring through the cracked hatch and the distant engine still idling somewhere beyond the cabin. Then a different voice spoke from above, older, roughened by cold and distance, but steady. "If I'd meant to kill you, I wouldn't have opened that slowly." The soldier said nothing. The dog did not advance, but the dark seemed to tighten around him. The voice continued. "They're not mine. They came after me. They think I know what's down there." A second set of footsteps crossed the cabin floor overhead, then a hard whisper. "You see it?" Another reply, sharper. "Just the hatch." The man above the stairs exhaled once. "Listen carefully. There are 4 of them left in the room. Maybe 5 outside. If they hear us arguing, they'll come down shooting blind. If you want to live past the next 60 seconds, let me in." The soldier weighed tone, cadence, breath control. The man above sounded tired but not desperate, as if fear had burned off hours ago. That made him more dangerous, not less. Yet there was no time to parse. The boot retreated. Instead of descending, the stranger pushed the hatch down, almost closed again from above, cutting the light. Then came the sudden crash of a chair against a wall in the cabin, followed by shouting. "He's under here! Move it!" A gunshot blasted overhead. Dust rained from the joists. The dog sprang to the second stair and held there, vibrating with focus. The soldier dragged the iron-banded door inward behind him, found an old sliding bolt, and shoved it home just as the cellar hatch above flew wide and multiple boots pounded down to the first chamber. Voices exploded in the darkness they had just left. "Door!" He went through. "Break it!" Wood boomed once under a shoulder strike. The old iron bands held. Another impact came, then another, heavier. The stranger was suddenly on the soldier's side of the door, appearing from darkness as if the stone itself had released him. He had dropped through the hatch at the last possible second and followed by memory, not sight. The soldier had not heard him because the man moved like someone who had spent years teaching himself to leave no sound. Up close he looked older than first impression suggested, maybe late 60s, weathered down to tendon and bone, eyes pale and shockingly alert inside a face carved by mountain winters. Snow still clung to the shoulders of his coat. In one hand he held a revolver so old it looked inherited. In the other, a short iron pry bar. "Left passage," he whispered, already turning. "If this door fails, the tunnel narrows. One at a time." The soldier made the decision not because he trusted the stranger, but because the dog, who trusted no one lightly, glanced at the man once and did not challenge him. They moved into the passage beyond. The beam from the soldier's cup flashlight revealed a tunnel cut partly through stone and partly through packed earth, reinforced in places with old timber that had darkened almost black. It sloped gently down and away from the cabin. The air carried water, rust, and something else now, an acrid note, like old chemicals or fuel long absorbed into dirt. Behind them the iron-banded door took another tremendous hit and groaned inward a fraction. The stranger moved quickly despite age, one hand skimming the wall, guiding them through turns as if he had walked the tunnel more times than he cared to count. "What is this place?" the soldier breathed. "Older than the cabin," the man whispered. "Newer trouble built on top of it." Another impact boomed behind them. The bolt shrieked. The dog looked back once but kept pace. The passage opened at last into a wider chamber where the ceiling rose high enough to stand fully upright. Here the flashlight beam found proof that the cellar had once been used for more than storage. Metal cots leaned broken against the far wall. Empty oxygen bottles lay stacked in a corner. A rusted cabinet hung open like a broken jaw. And along one side, behind hanging plastic sheeting gone brittle with age, sat 3 hospital beds with restraints still fixed to the rails. The soldier stopped dead. No one built this under a hunting cabin by accident. The stranger did not turn. "Keep moving," he said. "This isn't even the worst room." They pressed on through another doorway where the tunnel bent into a corridor lined with old conduit and dead fluorescent fixtures. Here the construction changed. Stone gave way to poured concrete patched over older rock, as if someone had expanded the original underground space with money and secrecy decades after the first cut into the mountain. Water dripped from the ceiling in patient intervals. The dog's nails ticked softly on the damp floor. Then the weak cough came again, clearer this time, followed by a human voice so thin it sounded almost imaginary. "Please!" The soldier broke into a run. Around the bend, in a room no bigger than a closet with a steel grate bolted across the entrance, he found her. She could not have been more than 14 or 15, wrapped in a wool blanket too small for her frame, one wrist cuffed to a pipe, face pale with fever and exhaustion. Her hair was hacked short unevenly, as if someone had cut it in a hurry. There was dirt under her nails and a healing bruise along one cheekbone. Yet when the flashlight touched her face she squinted, lifted her chin, and asked the most dangerous question a person in captivity can ask. "Are you real?" The soldier knelt at the grate. "Yes." She looked at the dog next, and something in her expression softened with immediate, almost painful relief. "He came back," she whispered. The shepherd pressed his nose between the bars and exhaled. The stranger behind the soldier closed his eyes briefly, like a man seeing a memory he had not allowed himself to believe in. "I told them not to keep her here," he murmured. The girl's gaze snapped to him, then hardened. "You never stopped them." The words hit with the force of truth. The stranger accepted them without defense. Behind them, far down the corridor, the iron door finally gave way with a crash that shuddered through the entire underground. Men shouted. Light flared in the first chamber. The soldier twisted the old great lock with the pry bar, failed once, then wedged and tore the corroded bracket free in one violent wrench. The gate opened. The girl tried to stand and nearly folded. The dog moved instantly to brace her, body pressed against her leg. She gripped his fur like someone grabbing the edge of the world. "There are others?" the soldier asked. She shook her head, then nodded, then seemed to force herself upright through confusion and fear. "There were. Some got moved. Some—" She stopped. The stranger looked down the corridor toward the approaching lights. "No more time." "Who are they?" the soldier demanded. The girl answered before the old man could. "The men from the storm shelter road. The ones who say they rescue people when the blizzards cut the town off." Her mouth trembled, but her voice did not. "They don't rescue everyone." The first beam of a flashlight speared the corridor bend. The dog stepped between the girl and the light. A man's voice echoed ahead, hard and triumphant. "Found you." The soldier shoved the girl behind him, raised the rifle, and in the instant before gunfire started he saw on the wall beside the cell a painted symbol half flaked away by damp, a red cross over a black triangle, and beneath it a phrase in old stenciled letters that made his blood go cold: Mountain Relief Station 4. The local storm shelter program had not been built to save the stranded. It had been built over this place to hide it. The first shot came from the far bend and slammed sparks from concrete above the soldier's head. He dropped flat, dragging the girl with him by the shoulder while the dog lunged forward just far enough to break the attacker's sideline and force them back around the corner. The old man fired once with the revolver. The blast in the corridor punched at their ears like a hammer. A cry answered from the bend, followed by curses and the scrape of someone falling hard against the wall. "Move!" the soldier ordered, already hauling the girl upright again. She was burning with fever under the blanket and lighter than she should have been, all sharp wrists and stubborn bones. He handed her the flashlight on its lowest shielded setting. "Stay on the dog." "Not me. If he turns, you turn." She nodded with the frightening obedience of someone who had spent too much time following orders to survive. They retreated deeper through the underground complex while gunfire snapped intermittently behind them, each shot controlled now, less like a wild assault and more like men trying not to hit whatever they valued inside the tunnels. That mattered. It meant the place itself was part of their purpose, not just the girl. The soldier filed that away even as he ran. The old man led them through a maintenance room cluttered with broken generators, oxygen tanks, and shelves of mildewed blankets stamped with state emergency markings from decades earlier. Every object in the room had the look of something official that had been forgotten by the world but remembered by the wrong people. A rescue station once, perhaps legitimate at the beginning, buried into the mountain to shelter travelers when roads vanished under snow. Then funding cuts, records lost, ownership transferred, a cabin built above it as cover, a town program later shaped around the lie. Such things happened. Institutions died on paper and kept breathing underneath because secrecy was profitable. The dog stopped at a side room without warning and barked once at a steel locker bolted into the wall. The soldier almost kept moving, but the shepherd's insistence had saved him too many times. He wrenched the locker open. Inside were files sealed in plastic bins, labeled by winter season and county route number, along with maps, old badges, and medical intake sheets stacked thick enough to stop his breath. Names blacked out by water damage. Dates spanning years. Notes on exposures, injuries, transfers. Some pages official. Others handwritten in a different, colder language: suitable, non-viable, no family claims, redirected. The girl saw the files and went white. "They keep records on everyone they take from the roads," she whispered. The old man grabbed one bin and thrust it into the soldier's arms. "Take what proves the place exists. The soldier shoved the files into a canvas tool bag and kept moving. The corridor narrowed again, dipped, then rose into a loading bay cut into the mountain behind an old steel door now chained shut from inside. Snow had drifted under the lower seam. A truck once could have backed to it. Now the chain links were new enough to shine. "This way out?" the soldier asked. "Used to be," the old man said. He jammed the pry bar into the chain loop and leaned with everything left in him. The metal complained but held. Behind them, voices spread through the rooms they had abandoned. The attackers had split up. Smart enough to flank if multiple passages existed. The dog left the girl for 3 seconds, vanished into the dark behind a stack of broken cots, and returned carrying something clamped in his teeth. At first the soldier thought it was a tool. Then he saw the leather. A glove. Child-sized. On the inside, written in blue marker almost worn away, were 3 words: "If found, call," followed by a number no one had ever called. The girl stared at it and swallowed hard. "She was here in the fall," she said. "The little one." "What little one?" the soldier asked. She looked at him as if deciding whether hope would hurt more than silence. "My sister." A burst of noise erupted from the corridor behind them, bootsteps close now, men no longer bothering with stealth. The old man abandoned the chain and turned. "There's another passage through the sump room. Flooded in spring. If the pump still works, it reaches the lower ravine. Lead." They cut left into a chamber where standing water reflected their lights in broken shards. The smell here was terrible: oil, mold, and rot trapped under years of damp concrete. The old pump system sat against the wall, half rust and half stubborn machinery. The old man yanked the starter cord once, twice. Nothing. The soldier shoved the files at the girl, dropped beside the motor, stripped the housing with multi-tool speed, primed the line with numb fingers, and pulled again. The engine coughed. Died. Pulled again. Coughed harder. Then caught in a ragged, violent roar that echoed through the entire underground. Water began draining from a grated trench at the center of the room. Somewhere behind them an attacker shouted, "Pump room! Go!" No more hiding now. The soldier braced at the doorway while the old man and the girl pried at the floodgate on the far side. The dog stayed with the girl, then left her, then came back, restless in a pattern that meant he smelled more than one threat line approaching. The first man appeared at the corridor bend with a shotgun and a heavy parka marked with a mountain rescue patch stitched over older lettering. Respectability sewn over corruption. The soldier fired once. The man vanished backward with a strangled cry. Another beam flashed from lower right through a side vent in the wall. A second approach. "Down!" he shouted. Pellets tore through pipe and concrete. Steam exploded from a ruptured line and turned the pump room into blinding vapor. The dog surged into it without hesitation. The next sounds were all instinct and violence. A human scream cut short, a shotgun clattering, claws skidding on wet floor, the deep impact sound of 90 pounds of trained shepherd hitting a body at speed. The soldier moved on the noise, struck one attacker with the rifle stock as the man stumbled out of steam, then drove him into the wall hard enough to fold him. Another came through the vent side passage and grabbed for the girl. The old man hit him first with the pry bar, a terrible committed blow that landed above the collarbone and dropped the man to his knees. The girl did not freeze. She snatched the fallen shotgun, not to fire, but to shove the barrel against the man's chest and keep him down, knuckles white with effort. "Open it," she told the old man, voice shaking but iron underneath. The floodgate gave with a horrible wrench. Black water rushed past their boots toward a lower tunnel now exposed beyond the draining sump. Cold air breathed up from it carrying pine, rock, and open night. The ravine exit. "Go!" the soldier shouted. He whistled once, sharp and rising. The dog appeared out of steam instantly, muzzle dark, eyes clear, coming straight to his side as if he had been summoned from memory instead of chaos. They plunged into the lower tunnel together. Behind them, the pump engine suddenly sputtered under a shot and died. The room fell into shouts and darkness. The tunnel out was low and half collapsed, forcing the soldier to crouch while supporting the girl with one arm and dragging the tool bag of files with the other. The dog led now, nose high, finding the usable line through rockfall and ice. The old man came last, breath ragged, revolver empty. Water ran underfoot in a freezing ribbon. Twice the tunnel narrowed so much they had to turn sideways. Once the ceiling dropped, and the soldier had to kneel to pull the girl through while the dog went ahead and barked from darkness until they reached him. At last a pale blue light appeared ahead. They emerged through a split in the mountain wall masked by brush and snow into a ravine choked with firs. Night had deepened. The storm was still falling, but the trees broke the worst of it. The old man bent double, gasping. The girl leaned against the dog, who held her up with patient force. The soldier scanned the slope. No immediate pursuit yet. But tracks in a ravine after fresh snow were invitations. "My truck's at the cabin," he said. The old man shook his head violently. "Then it's already gone." The girl looked uphill toward the dark line where the cabin stood hidden beyond the ridge. "They won't let us leave the county," she whispered. "They always close the roads first." The soldier stared at her. "What do you mean they close them?" She answered with the numb certainty of someone describing weather. "Every storm. They say it's for safety." Far above the trees, from the direction of the county road, a siren began to wail once, long and low, joined by another farther away, then another. Not emergency response. A signal. A call going out across the mountain that the roads were shutting down and no one was supposed to come through. The storm rescue network had just been activated, and this time it was hunting them. The ravine forced a choice: climb toward the road where patrols would be waiting under the cover of official closures, or descend deeper into timber and risk freezing before dawn. The soldier chose downhill because men were more predictable than weather and because the dog had already turned that way without needing to be told. The shepherd moved through snow with the effortless intelligence of an animal that understood terrain better than maps. He chose for cover over open slope, frozen creek over powder drifts, and each time the soldier trusted him because trust, after years of surviving together, had become less decision than reflex. The girl stumbled twice in the first 100 yards. Fever made her eyes shine too bright in the dark. The old man, who had introduced himself to no one and offered no explanations beyond the minimum required for movement, kept close behind with a hand hovering near her shoulder but never touching unless she pitched too far sideways. Once she nearly fell and snapped. "I'm fine," the old man answered. "No, you're not," in a voice that contained no impatience at all, only grief worn down to habit. That told the soldier more than any confession could. Snow filled the ravine in long drifts where wind curled through the trees. The night smelled of sap, ice, and distant diesel. Over the next hour that smell grew stronger each time the wind shifted, proof that vehicles were moving on the road above, pacing the mountain. Through gaps in the timber the soldier saw amber hazard lights far off, crawling lines where county plows and rescue trucks should have been clearing for the stranded. Instead they were establishing a perimeter. Storm closures gave cover for almost anything if the right people controlled the gates and radios. The soldier had seen that too, in countries far from here and in institutions much closer to home. Corruption did not invent itself. It borrowed uniforms first. They reached an abandoned fire lookout shack just before the girl's legs finally gave out beneath her. The structure crouched under snow at the edge of a clearing, roof sagging but walls mostly intact, used once upon a time by forestry crews who watched lightning fires in summer and forgot the mountains still belonged to winter. The dog checked it, circling once, then reappeared from the broken doorway with no alarm. Inside, the air was bitter but still, and stillness could be turned into survival. The soldier lit a tiny stove from old waxed paper and broken chair legs while the old man stripped a moldy cot frame for slats to feed the fire. The girl sank onto a blanket and shivered so hard her teeth knocked together, though her skin burned under the soldier's hand. He found a medical tin in his pack and forced warm water and fever tablets into her a little at a time. The dog lay pressed along her side, sharing heat as naturally as breathing. In the half-light from the stove she looked younger than before, almost childlike in the way exhaustion erased whatever toughened years had carved into her face. Yet when the soldier asked for the number on the glove, she recited it immediately, every digit perfect. She had kept that number alive in her head like a candle no one else could see. "Your mother?" he asked. She shook her head. "A diner off Route 7. My sister remembered it from a napkin. Said if anything happened, somebody there would answer. Why didn't you call?" She gave him a look no child should know how to give. "They don't let you keep phones." The old man sat apart from them on an overturned crate, revolver across his knees, staring into the stove. Up close in warmth he looked less like a hunter and more like a man who had once belonged in offices and meetings, someone educated, perhaps once respected, before shame drove him into weather and hiding. His hands were neat despite the grime, fingers careful when he touched anything mechanical. The soldier took out the files they had carried from underground and spread them on the floor between them. Intake forms. Transfer manifests. Incident reports. Photographs paper-clipped to folders. Some grainy, some crisp. Cars recovered from ditches. Hikers pulled from storms. Families listed as relocated for medical reasons. But the dates did not match public reports on local accidents and rescues. Some names appeared on official missing person bulletins the soldier vaguely remembered seeing at gas stations on the way into the county. Some never appeared at all. The girl watched him turn the pages and said quietly, "They kept the healthy ones longer." His hand stopped. "Healthy for what?" She looked at the old man, and when he still did not answer, she did. "When storms hit and roads closed, people came in hurt, lost, alone. Some were real rescues. Some were chosen. If they had no one checking fast enough, or if they had things worth taking, or if they could disappear without a town making noise." Her voice thinned, but she continued. "The shelter took them. Papers changed. Cars moved. Stories made. Sometimes they sold supplies and medicine off the books and used the station to hide it. Sometimes it was worse. The soldier understood then why the old relief room below had contained hospital beds and restraints, why medical intake sheets sat beside route maps and county seals. Human trafficking did not always look like chains in cities. Sometimes it looked like county aid, floodlights in snow, volunteers in bright jackets, a stretcher rolled into a blizzard, and paperwork filed by men the town thanked every winter. The old man finally spoke. It started smaller. He kept his eyes on the stove. At least that's what we told ourselves. Supplies diverted. Records adjusted. A person no one could identify kept overnight instead of reported. Then men with more money than the county came in. Said mountain roads made certain movements easier during closures. Said those no one claimed could be reassigned on paper. Bad weather writes clean stories if the radios all say the same thing. The soldier's jaw tightened. "You were in it." "I built the communications wing," the old man said. "Retired engineer. Came up here after my wife died. They pitched it as regional emergency infrastructure. Real funding, real purpose in the beginning. Then the station was privatized and buried under shell ownership. By the time I understood what it had become, I had already helped them make it harder to expose." The girl did not look at him. "He left one winter," she said. "Came back the next with food hidden in a vent and bolt cutters wrapped in rags." The old man swallowed. Too late for most. The dog raised his head abruptly, ears forward toward the tree line. No bark. Just attention. The soldier killed the stove damper to lower the glow and listened. At first, wind. Then the crunch of several people moving slowly outside the shack, spreading apart. Search pattern. The old man's pale eyes met his in the dim. They had tracked them faster than expected. The soldier slid the files back into the bag, checked the rifle, and mapped the room in one glance. One door, one broken rear window, thin walls. Bad place to hold. "Can you move?" he asked the girl. She nodded, though badly. The dog was already at her side, waiting for the command he knew was coming. The soldier turned to the old man. "That number on the glove. The diner. You know it?" Used to be a relay stop for truckers before the county rerouted winter traffic. Then that's our line out. If it still exists. A beam washed across the shack window. Another answered from the far side. A voice outside called in practiced official tones, warm enough to disarm civilians. County rescue! We know someone's inside. Weather's turning dangerous. Step out where we can help you. The girl shrank against the wall so fast it seemed involuntary. The dog placed himself between her and the door. The soldier did not move. The voice came again, still patient. You may be frightened. We're here to get you warm and safe. In the silence that followed, the old man whispered, That one runs dispatch. If he's in the field, they're desperate. The soldier looked once at the shattered rear window and the drop beyond it into dark timber. Too steep for easy descent. Good enough. He wrapped the files in plastic, slung the bag across his chest, and broke the rest of the glass with the rifle butt. The crash answered their choice. Outside, boots pounded toward the rear. The soldier lifted the girl through first into black air and snow while the dog leapt after her. The old man shoved the revolver into the soldier's hand and said, If I slow you down, leave me. Then the front door splintered inward under a battering ram and men in storm rescue jackets poured into the shack just as the soldier jumped through the window into darkness, landing knee-deep in snow beside the girl and the dog, and below them, hidden beyond the trees, something impossible glimmered through the storm. A line of warm yellow lights far off in the valley where the road should have been closed and empty. The diner from the glove number was still open. The slope below the lookout shack was steeper than it had looked from inside. Snow gave way under each step and carried them sliding in short, brutal drops through saplings and buried rock. The soldier went first once he had the girl on her feet again, breaking path while the dog worked slightly below her, angling his body to keep her from pitching forward whenever she lost balance. The old man came behind until a shout from above told them the searchers had found the broken window and understood exactly where their prey had gone. Then there were lights in the trees overhead, white beams cutting through branches, and voices calling positions in crisp radio shorthand that only made the soldiers' suspicions harder and more certain. These were not panicked volunteers. These were practice pursuit teams using emergency structure as camouflage. The mountain amplified everything. A snapped branch could sound like a rifle crack. A shouted name could come from 3 directions at once. The soldier led them into a frozen creek where ice carried less scent and the banks gave cover from searchlights. Twice he had to stop and listen while engines crawled on the ridge above. Once a tracked rescue machine passed so close he could hear chains clinking under its chassis and smell exhaust rolling downhill. The dog stood absolutely still through the whole thing, body in front of the girl, ears back, waiting for movement rather than reacting to noise. That kind of steadiness does not come from training alone. It comes from a bond hammered over time until the animal begins to read the man's silence as clearly as command. By dawn the storm had softened into a heavy sift of snow that turned the valley pale. Through thinning trees the diner came into view beside a bend in the county road, exactly where the girl had said it would be. Low roof, 2 fuel pumps, frost-coated windows glowing amber against the white morning like the promise of a world not entirely poisoned. A hand-painted sign hung above the door, one chain snapped on one side so the board leaned crooked in the wind. There were 3 trucks in the lot, 1 snowmobile parked under the overhang, and no marked rescue vehicles in sight. That worried the soldier more than if there had been. Real safety in corrupt places is never advertised. He stopped them in the tree line. We don't all walk in together. The old man nodded instantly. The girl gripped the dog's collar, fever dulling her face into a dangerous kind of calm. They'll know me. Then keep the blanket over your head until I tell you otherwise. And if this place is theirs too? The old man asked. The soldier looked at the dog. The shepherd's gaze was fixed on the building, ears forward, no sign of alarm yet. He trusted that more than any plan. They crossed the road one at a time under the cover of a delivery truck idling at the pump. The soldier entered first. Warmth and burnt coffee smell hit him at once, along with frying grease, wet wool, and the peculiar quiet that settles over diners in mountain weather when strangers arrive. Every booth was occupied except one near the back. A waitress in her late 50s stood behind the counter with a coffee pot in one hand and eyes that missed nothing. She took in the soldier's torn coat, the wet files bag slung across his chest, the rifle wrapped in blanket cloth to disguise it, and then she looked past him to the German shepherd stepping through the door with the girl under his shoulder. For 1 second her face changed in a way only someone waiting years for bad news can understand. Not surprise. Recognition. "Kitchen," she said without greeting, and jerked her chin toward a swing door behind the counter. No one else in the diner looked up fast enough to notice anything more than weather-worn travelers. The kitchen behind the door was hotter, louder, filled with steam and metal clatter. A younger cook glanced over from the grill, saw the girl, and swore softly under his breath like a prayer landing wrong. The waitress set down the coffee pot, reached for the girl's face with both hands, then stopped short of touching her, afraid perhaps she might vanish if handled too roughly. "Sweetheart," she whispered. The girl pulled the blanket back. "I found the number," she said. The waitress closed her eyes for half a second. "No. He found you." She looked at the dog, and all the fear in her face broke into gratitude so fierce it almost looked like pain. The old man came through the door last, and at the sight of him the cook's expression turned dark. "You!" The old man did not defend himself. "Later," the waitress said sharply. She moved with sudden, efficient authority. "Storeroom. Now. Road teams listen to scanners. They'll hear nothing from here." They crowded into a narrow pantry behind sacks of flour and canned goods while the waitress locked the outer latch. The girl drank broth straight from a mug, both hands shaking. The dog sat pressed against her boots. The soldier spread the rescued files on a crate and told the waitress everything from the cabin hatch to the underground cells while the cook listened with his jaw clenched hard enough to show tendon. When the soldier finished, the waitress said only, "I knew they were lying about the road rescues. I didn't know how bad." She reached into her apron, pulled out an old flip phone wrapped in plastic, and set it on the crate. "We keep this off the county towers. Signal only catches from the ridge west of here. Used to be for drivers when dispatch started rerouting during storms. She's had that number memorized since her sister hid it in a sugar packet 2 years ago." The girl looked up fast. "My sister was here?" The waitress nodded, swallowing hard. "For less than 10 minutes. She got loose from somebody's truck in the lot during a whiteout. Ran in barefoot, bleeding, terrified. They were right behind her in rescue coats, saying she was confused. We didn't know who to trust. I tried to hold her. She slipped me the number and said if the older one ever got out, tell her the Valley Church bell rings even when no one pulls it." The room went still. The girl whispered the words once, as if feeling their shape. "What does that mean?" the soldier asked. The old man answered slowly. "There's an old mission church downriver. Closed for years. Bell tower cracked in a lightning storm. No rope on the bell." He looked at the waitress. "You sure that's what she said?" "Every word." The soldier felt the pattern forming before he could name it. A hidden station under a cabin. Stolen survivors. Paper trails. A diner relay. And now a church with a bell that rang by itself. The dog stood abruptly and crossed to the far pantry wall. He sniffed once at a stacked crate of canned peaches, pawed behind it, and revealed a small rust-stained map tube hidden between the wall studs. The waitress stared. "I never knew that was there." The old man took the tube with shaking hands. Inside was a survey map of the valley from before the county road had been rerouted, marked with old access routes, drainage tunnels, and relief outposts no longer on public records. One point had been circled in red at the old mission church. Another symbol matched the black triangle crossed by red paint from the underground cell wall. "Station 2, the old man breathed. There were at least 4. The cook swore again, lower this time. "Then the church is another site. Or where they moved records," the soldier said. "Or people," the girl added. Before anyone answered, the diner's front bell jingled. One customer too many, too late in the weather. Through the thin pantry wall they heard male voices greeting the waitress in practiced, friendly tones. County Dispatch asking after closures. Casual. Curious. Fishing. The waitress's face hardened into something colder than fear. They're here. The cook slid a meat cleaver from the shelf, not because it was useful against rifles, but because men like him could not stand empty-handed when evil walked into their place of work. The soldier checked the rifle and revolver, then looked at the girl. Can you travel another mile? She met his eyes with feverish clarity. If my sister might be there, I can travel all day. The dog leaned against her as if confirming it. The old man unrolled the survey map over flour sacks. There was a drainage culvert under the road behind the diner leading toward the frozen river and from there to the old mission grounds. Hidden. Narrow. Unmonitored if the rescue teams assumed their quarry would take roads or timber. The waitress pulled the pantry latch but did not open it yet. She looked at the soldier the way mountain people look at a coming storm they have decided to face anyway. I'll hold them long enough to get you under the road. They'll know you helped. They already know I never believed them, she said. Then she turned to the girl and pressed a small silver diner bell into her hand, one usually rung by truckers at the counter when no one was front of house. Your sister left this under the napkin holder. Said if you heard a bell where there shouldn't be one, run toward it. The girl stared at the bell like it was a heartbeat made solid. Out front a chair scraped, then a man's voice rose just enough to sharpen the room. Funny weather for runaways. The waitress straightened, lifted her coffee pot like a weapon disguised as welcome, and opened the pantry door. Back exit, she whispered. Now. The soldier moved first with the map and files. The dog guided the girl. The old man followed. Behind them, as the waitress stepped back into the diner, her voice carried clear and bright in false hospitality. Gentlemen, if you're looking for trouble this morning, you can start by paying for the coffee. The culvert behind the diner was half hidden under drifted trash fencing and a skin of ice, exactly the kind of place no one looked at closely because no one wanted to crawl inside if they could avoid it. The soldier broke the crust with the butt of the revolver and slid feet first into the black concrete tube, landing in ankle-deep runoff cold enough to numb the legs immediately. The dog went after him without hesitation, then turned and helped pull the girl through the opening by giving her shoulder pressure where she needed it most. The old man came last just as raised voices burst from the diner. No gunshots yet. The waitress was buying them seconds, perhaps more, perhaps the last she had. The culvert ran under the county road and then bent toward the frozen river flats, low enough that the adults had to hunch while the girl, though weak, could move more easily. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow icy ticks. Somewhere above them engines idled and boots crossed frozen gravel, muffled by concrete and snow. They moved in darkness broken only by the soldier's shielded flashlight and the pale rectangle of dawn trailing far behind. In confined passages like that every man's breathing becomes public, and the soldier heard things he would not forget later. The old man's lungs failing and recovering in stubborn little battles, the girl's swallowing pains so she would not make noise, the dog's controlled exhalations every few steps as he checked on each of them in turn. When they emerged at last into a reed-choked drainage ditch near the river, the valley had opened into a broad white basin wrapped by ridges and pines. Far to the east the old mission church stood on a rise above the frozen water, bell tower split but somehow still upright, windows dark, graveyard fences swallowed to the top rail in snow. It looked abandoned enough to be safe, which meant almost certainly that it was not. The old man studied the survey map with gloveless fingers despite the cold. Drain line under the church. Relief stores. Maybe a second cellar. If Station 2 survived at all, access is below the sacristy. The soldier nodded and scanned the flats. No tracks fresh near the church from this distance, but the wind had wiped most surface detail anyway. Behind them, from the road near the diner, came a sharp cluster of radio chirps carried faintly through air. The search had widened. They cut across the river not on the open center, where ice can betray even when it looks thick, but near the shadowed bank where snow had drifted and frozen in layered ridges over older ice. The dog led with uncanny precision, choosing lines that held and skirting dark patches where water still moved under the crust. Halfway across, he stopped dead. Every muscle in him locked. The soldier followed his gaze to the church rise. A figure stood in the bell tower opening, backlit by pale morning, not moving. Too thin to be one of the road men. Too still to be accidental. The soldier raised the revolver but could not get a clean angle through drifting snow. The figure lifted one arm and pointed downward toward the church door, then vanished. The girl made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. "She does that," she whispered. "Who?" The girl looked at him with fierce, shaking hope. "My sister." No one argued because hope, once named aloud in places like that, has the power to move exhausted people farther than reason. They climbed the rise hard, boots breaking crust and sinking into powder. The church doors were swollen shut, chain hanging broken from one hinge. The dog ignored them entirely and went around to the side where drifted snow had banked against a small half-buried basement window. He pawed once, then began digging with violent focus, snow spraying behind him. Beneath the drift, iron bars appeared over the glass. The soldier smashed the pane with the pry bar. Cold stale air billowed out carrying wax, damp stone, and the unmistakable scent of people who had occupied a place recently and often. He lowered himself through first into darkness, landed on old flagstones, and brought the others down after. The room below had once stored communion wine and winter coal. Now it held cots, blankets, food tins, battery lanterns, a radio array built from scavenged parts, and along one wall a table covered in maps of the valley marked with road closures and rescue routes in red pencil. On another wall hung photographs of missing people cut from notices and newspapers, each with notes in tight, careful handwriting. Some had dates and question marks. Some had black X marks. Others had arrows leading toward tunnel symbols. It was not a trap. It was a watch post. Someone had been studying the system from inside it. Then a girl stepped out from behind the altar stairs with a crossbow aimed level at the soldier's chest. She was older than the other one by maybe 2 years, thin but strong in the way hunger and endurance shape a person who refuses to die. Her face carried the same eyes, the same jawline, only harder. She saw the dog first, and the crossbow dipped an inch. Then she saw the younger girl and all hardness broke. The weapon hit the floor. They reached each other at the same second and collided with the kind of force only siblings split by terror can produce, both crying without sound at first because relief can be too large for language. The dog stood over them both, tail low, eyes watchful, as if the reunion mattered but the danger had not changed. It had not. The older girl looked up through tears and said, "They're coming. I rang the bell line when I saw you on the river." The soldier frowned. "Bell line?" She led them to a hand crank rigged under the stairwell where thin wire ran up through the broken tower. Old mission rope was gone. So I used salvage wire and a brake drum. From far away it sounds like a bell if the wind carries it right. The younger sister opened her palm and showed the silver diner bell. The older one stared and covered her mouth. "She kept it. For you," the younger said. The old man turned slowly around the room, taking in maps and notes, and the radio. "You built all this?" The older girl's eyes hardened when they fell on him. "I learned from listening to men who thought kids were furniture." She went to the table, spread one map flat, and pointed to the valley. "Station 4 under the cabin is only intake and transfer. The real archive is under county dispatch. But when storms hit, they stage from 3 old sites, the church, the mine road shed, and a sub-basement beneath the clinic." The soldier felt the scale unfold. Not one evil place, but a network layered into civic life. The older girl pointed to the roads. "Today they'll search outward and seal the bridge. If they think we're at the church, they'll send field teams first and keep dispatch clean. That's their weakness." "Dispatch," the soldier said. "The radios." The old man nodded, mind racing now. "If we reach the county communications hub and force an open broadcast beyond local repeaters, every storm unit hears the truth at once. State Patrol too if the Ridge Relay still exists." The younger girl swayed where she stood. The older caught her immediately, fear returning in a different form. She's burning up. The soldier checked her pulse. Too fast. Too weak. The dog nosed at a cupboard near the wall, then pawed it sharply. Inside lay a cache of antibiotics, 4 kits, and oxygen cannulas scavenged from one of the stations. The older sister said, I took what I could over months. Didn't know if it was enough. The old man moved faster than anyone then, sorting medicine with hands that remembered systems even if his conscience had once failed them. It's enough if we have time. Time, of course, was exactly what they did not have. Outside, faint at first, then unmistakable, engines began to climb the church road. Multiple vehicles. The older girl looked toward the stairwell. They found the diner faster than I hoped. The soldier went to the narrow church window and saw storm rescue trucks fanning into position below the graveyard, bright jackets stepping into snow with rifles hidden under emergency blankets. Official corruption always carries props. He turned back to the room. 2 sisters. A dying county secret. A communications engineer who wanted redemption. A waitress possibly holding off armed men at a roadside diner. And the dog, who had found every turn that mattered so far, now standing beside the radio table with one paw resting on a paper the others had overlooked. It was a transfer schedule dated for that night. Under route destination, one line stood out in block letters: Evacuation to Ridge Dispatch Archive before state audit. The county had learned an audit was coming. Tonight they intended to move or destroy everything. The soldier folded the paper once and looked at the others. Then we stop them at dispatch, he said. Outside, a loudspeaker crackled from the churchyard, and the false kindness of the storm rescue voice rolled up through falling snow. Anyone inside, this is your last safe chance to come out. They did not have the luxury of choosing between rescue and exposure anymore. The younger sister needed treatment quickly, perhaps a hospital if one existed beyond the county's rotten core. But hospitals required roads and roads required breaking the network first. The older sister understood this before anyone explained it. She tightened the blanket around the younger girl's shoulders, brushed snow-melt hair from her face, and said with a calmness learned the hard way, You get her through today, and I'll get you into dispatch. The old man looked at her with something like astonishment and regret mixed together. You've mapped it? She gave him a flat look. You think I survived hiding in church walls by praying only? The soldier almost smiled, but the moment was too sharp for it. The plan formed under pressure the way the best desperate plans do, not elegant, but executable. The church sat on higher ground with old drainage trenches running downhill toward the frozen cemetery and road. The older girl had rigged trip lines, false tracks, and 2 battery-powered lanterns hidden in opposite windows to make the place appear occupied from multiple rooms. The soldier added what he knew about pursuit, sight lines, and panic. They would split the searchers' attention at the church, draw the field teams inward, then use the mission's burial crypt access on the far side, an old undertaker's passage leading down the ridge, to exit unseen into the trees behind the schoolyard. From there, a maintenance tunnel connected the abandoned boiler house to the county annex. The old man claimed annex blueprints once linked that basement to dispatch after a flood retrofit nobody had fully documented. If he was right, they could reach the radio room under the county building without touching the front entrance. If he was wrong, they would die under municipal concrete instead of church stone. The soldier found the risk acceptable. Outside, voices spread through the churchyard and boots crunched among graves. The loudspeaker repeated its offer of safety with increasing impatience. The dog moved between windows, checking them with military thoroughness. When the first side door gave under a ram, he barked once, not alarm, but signal. The older sister flipped a hidden switch. One lantern flared in the bell tower. Another in the rear chapel. Shouts answered from outside. Men split instinctively toward movement. The soldier opened a vent behind the altar and launched a smoke flare from his emergency kit into the nave. It was not military smoke, just a rescue flare modified and angry enough to fill the sanctuary with choking white within seconds. Through the floor vents they heard confusion detonate above, coughing, boots sliding, men yelling to hold positions they no longer understood. The group dropped through the crypt hatch at the rear. The tunnel below was old brick, coffin-width in places, lined with empty niches and damp roots hanging through mortar. The younger sister was drifting in and out now, and the dog stayed glued to her as if presence alone could hold fever at bay. The older sister moved first, crossbow slung, flashlight clamped in her teeth. The old man came behind her with a map. The soldier carried the file bag and the revolver, and when the tunnel steepened he half lifted the younger girl under one arm, feeling how little weight remained in her. They emerged into a stand of cedars behind the ridge just as vehicles converged on the church doors and one of the field teams fired blindly into an upper window. The smoke turned the bell tower into a white wound against the storm. Good. Let them bleed time. The route to the schoolyard crossed abandoned lots and frozen back alleys where snowmobile tracks braided between garages and sheds. The county town itself looked peaceful under all that winter, chimneys smoking, plows parked, wreaths still hanging on porches left over from a season long past. Evil rarely announces itself with ruins. Often it thrives best under neat trim and flags and ordinary errands. As they moved, the older sister pointed out things she had learned from months of watching from margins: which homes belonged to dispatched men, which trucks doubled as transfer vehicles, which back road was always salted first before storms because it led to the clinic basement where sedated rescues were held until paperwork could change. The soldier listened and watched the old man absorb each fact like a punishment he had earned. By the time they reached the boiler house behind the county school, his face had gone gray beneath the weather. The maintenance door was chained, but the old man smiled for the first time with no joy in it, and produced a ring of old keys from inside his coat. "I kept more than guilt," he said. The key fit on the third try. Inside, the boiler house smelled of rust, dust, and long-dead heat. The tunnel beyond was narrow but serviceable, concrete throat humming faintly with the electrical life of the buildings above. The dog led again, paws almost soundless. Halfway through, they passed old flood marks painted on the wall from a disaster 30 years earlier. The county had poured millions into resilience after that flood, built new communication lines, emergency shelters, grant-funded relief programs. The corruption had not grown despite those systems. It had grown through them. That was what made it durable. At the far end of the tunnel a steel door stood ajar by an inch. Voices floated through. Mail. Casual. Board. Dispatch basement security, likely thinking no threat would ever come from the utility corridors. The soldier handed the file bag to the old man and crouched by the dog. No words. No need. The shepherd understood the direction of the man's eyes and the shape of the space. The soldier opened the door fast. The dog flowed through like released water. The first guard made the mistake of looking down instead of back. He hit the floor under 90 pounds of controlled impact before he understood what had entered the room. The second reached for a radio. The old man struck his wrist with the pry bar. The older sister drove the crossbow stock into his jaw. The soldier caught the radio mid-fall. No shots. No alarm yet. They dragged both men into a janitor closet and moved deeper. Dispatch above them sounded like any county operations center during bad weather: phones, keyboards, voices reading road conditions, units checking routes. Nothing in the sound betrayed the filth underneath. The basement archive, however, did. Rows of filing cabinets. Locked server racks. Medical coolers. A whiteboard listing storm names and intake capacity. Monitors showing traffic cameras on closed roads. Photographs clipped to route logs. And at the center, beyond glass, the main radio hub where a dispatcher in a rescue fleece sat wearing a headset and directing teams toward the church perimeter even now. The old man stared through the glass like he was looking at the beating heart of something he had helped design. "The external ridge relay is still active," he whispered. "If I patch master broadcast through the old emergency override, every channel opens. Public weather, state line, forest service, trucker band, all of it." "Do it," the soldier said. "Not yet," the older sister snapped, pointing. Along the opposite wall, A reinforced freight elevator stood with its indicator descending from the upper floor toward basement level. Someone important was coming down. The soldier moved the younger sister behind a server stack and settled the dog beside her. The shepherd refused to take his eyes off the elevator. The old man slid to the console outside the glass radio room, fingers trembling over switches and ports. Need 30 seconds once the room is ours. The soldier took position near the elevator doors. The older sister knocked a bolt. The old man's hidden life, the sister's stolen years, the dog's relentless trail, the frozen cabin, the diner number, the mission bell, all of it had led here, to the point where truth either entered the airwaves or died under concrete. The elevator indicator reached basement level and dinged softly. The doors began to open. Inside stood not one official, but three: the county emergency director in full rescue parka, a clinic administrator with bloodless hands and a badge on a retractable reel, and behind them a broad man in civilian black carrying a portable hard case marked with biohazard tape. The man in black saw the soldier first, and smiled without surprise. "So the dog did find you," he said, as if greeting an overdue delivery. Some faces revealed the whole machine behind them. The man in black had that kind of face, not memorable in any one feature, but arranged with the ease of someone who had spent years standing near terrible things while believing himself above consequence. He saw the rifle, the crossbow, the old man at the console, the two sisters hidden badly enough that only a practiced eye would catch them, and still he smiled, because men protected by paperwork and weather come to mistake systems for immortality. "You don't understand what you're interrupting," he said. The county emergency director beside him did not smile. Sweat shone along his hairline despite the cold basement. He looked like every well-regarded public servant the soldier had ever seen standing behind podiums after disasters, thanking brave volunteers while moving budget lines no one read closely enough. The clinic administrator clutched the hard case tighter. "We can settle this," she said. "You have no idea how many lives depend on these routes staying intact." The older sister laughed once, a brutal sound with no humor in it. "Whose lives?" The elevator doors finished opening. No one moved for half a beat. Then the dog did. Not with the explosive forward assault he used in hallways or stairs, but with a low circling shift that put his body between the younger sister and the elevator line. The soldier saw where his gaze fixed, not on the men, but on the case. Something in that plastic and tape had the scent of the underground. "Set it down," the soldier said. The man in black tilted his head. "You're a long way from wherever they taught you to point guns at storms." "Set it down." The man's smile thinned. "You think this county is unique? Every hard place has its own version of triage. Some people vanish because the paperwork to save them costs more than anyone wants to spend. We simply made that efficient." The old man's hands froze above the console. Even he looked sick. The soldier had heard evil explain itself before, always in the language of necessity. In famine it called itself logistics. In war it called itself collateral. In mountains during blizzards it called itself rescue. The clinic administrator whispered, "Stop talking." Too late. The dog barked once, hard. The man in black flinched exactly enough. The soldier fired, not at center mass, but at the case. The shot shattered a latch. The case hit the floor and split open. Inside were medical records, frozen blood units, forged death certificates, and a drive rack stamped with state audit seals. The evidence they meant to move before inspection. Chaos followed. The emergency director dove for cover. The clinic administrator ran for the radio room glass door. The older sister's bolt took the wall beside her hand and pinned the sleeve of her coat long enough for the old man to tackle her with a desperation he had not shown all day. The man in black drew a pistol from under his coat. The dog hit him at the same second. The weapon fired into the ceiling. Dust and sparks rained down. The man crashed backward into the elevator threshold with the shepherd locked on his forearm, not tearing wildly, but holding with that terrible exact pressure that stops a body's intentions cold. The soldier crossed the distance in 2 steps and kicked the pistol away. The emergency director raised both hands instantly, survival beating loyalty. Listen to me, he babbled. There are names in those files you don't understand. Contracts. Federal. The old man cut him off from across the room, voice sharper than the pry bar in his fist. No more paperwork. Then he turned the override key at the radio console. The building changed pitch at once. Somewhere deep in the system, relays opened, static surged, and every speaker in the room cracked alive. The old man's fingers flew over switches with the certainty of muscle memory reborn for the right cause. Need voice ID, he said. The soldier shoved the nearest microphone toward him. The old man looked at it like a confession booth and began. This is an emergency unauthorized public broadcast from County Dispatch Relay. If you are hearing this, the storm rescue program in this county has been used for years to abduct, traffic, falsify deaths, divert medical resources, and conceal survivors during road closures. His voice carried not just through the room, but beyond it. The speakers over dispatch upstairs barked his words. The Weather Channel feed ceased. Trucker radios on highway bands would be hearing it now. Forest Service repeaters. State Patrol monitors. Every storm unit in the field. Every light dependent on local isolation was being dragged into open air at once. The emergency director screamed for him to stop. The older sister walked over and rang the little silver diner bell inches from the man's face until he shut up. The sound was small, bright, and devastating. Above them, the county building erupted into motion, doors slamming, people shouting, phones exploding into use. The soldier dragged the man in black out from under the dog and zip-tied him with medical tubing from the split case. Hold him, he told the dog, and the shepherd planted one paw on the man's chest like judgment made flesh. The younger sister coughed weakly from behind the server stack. Her older sister reached her just as the old man switched the broadcast to open file dump. Pages began feeding through the scanner and out over linked county fax, email, and emergency printers wherever old systems still answered. Maps. Intake logs. Transfer sheets. Enough to make destruction impossible even if the power died now. The clinic administrator, pinned against the wall by the old man's pry bar and her own fear, started crying in thin animal bursts. You'll kill winter coverage, she said. People really do need those roads cleared. Then someone honest can clear them, the soldier answered. Outside, sirens changed tone. New engines arrived, not the deep growl of county rescue trucks but the sharper, faster sounds of state units hitting town hard in bad weather. The old man kept talking into the microphone even after the file dump began, naming dates, building modifications, grant numbers, the names of shell companies that had owned the cabin and the buried stations. Every word cut another anchor line. The man in black spat blood and laughed through pain. You think this ends here? He asked the soldier. You think counties like this grow secrets on their own? The soldier looked at him and saw what was almost certainly true: deeper money, wider networks, bigger rooms. But truth does not have to end all evil at once to matter. Sometimes it only needs to stop the next truck, open the next roadblock, keep one more person from disappearing into a form with the wrong signature. It ends here for you, he said. Then the basement lights snapped off. Backup systems failed over a half-second later to dim red emergency strips, but in that half-second someone moved. The emergency director had bolted for the stairs. The dog started after him, but the younger sister gave a broken cry and collapsed fully to the floor. Everything else became secondary. The soldier dropped beside her. Skin blazing. Pulse racing and then skipping. The old man grabbed N4 kit from the spilled case and worked with terrible speed while the older sister held her sister's head in both hands and whispered useless beautiful things into her hair, the kind of promises made when medicine may already be too late. Above them boots thundered. State police or county loyalists or both. The old man slammed fluid into the line and looked up at the soldier with panic stripped bare. She needs oxygen and a real hospital now. The soldier scanned the room. The clinic administrator, seeing leverage, gasped. The trauma bay, upstairs annex. Negative pressure room. It's real. The older sister looked ready to kill her on the spot. The soldier almost agreed. But the girl in his arms shuddered again, and all choices narrowed. Through the speaker, the old man's broadcast continued to echo in empty hallways. Outside, the whole county was hearing the truth for the first time. Inside the dispatch basement, under red lights and falling dust, the soldier met the dog's eyes. The shepherd stood over the bound man in black, then looked toward the annex stairs, then back to the girl. He had chosen every crucial path so far. Now he chose again, leaving the prisoner, moving to the younger sister's side, and pressing his muzzle under her limp hand until her fingers twitched once around his fur. She was still with them. Barely. The soldier rose. "We go up," he said. "Right through the middle of it." Then somewhere above, from the annex corridor, a new voice shouted through the chaos, clear and commanding and very much not local. "State Bureau! Drop your weapons and keep your hands visible!" The cavalry had arrived, but whether it was in time for the girl was another question entirely. The next minutes passed in the shattered rhythm of emergencies when systems collide and people find out too late which uniforms they should have trusted all along. State investigators flooded the annex corridors from the main stair and rear motor pool, moving past county employees with drawn sidearms and hard faces that had not been bought by local weather budgets. There were commands, kneeling bodies, radios spitting orders, medics carrying oxygen, camera flashes already beginning because truth, once ripped open, attracts witnesses almost as fast as predators. The soldier carried the younger sister upstairs through that storm of law and panic, while the dog stayed so close his shoulder struck the soldier's knee every third step, unwilling to break contact even for a second. The older sister never left the other side. The old man followed with the file bag held to his chest like a heart he had finally decided to return. They laid the girl in the annex trauma room the clinic administrator had identified, and for one dangerous moment everyone hesitated because the room itself belonged to the poison system. Then a state medic shoved the county staff out with one sweep of her arm and began real work. Oxygen. Antibiotics. Warmed saline. Monitored pulse. Clean commands. Clean hands. The older sister stood in the corner shaking so violently she had to brace one palm against the wall to remain vertical. The dog planted himself beside the bed and would not move until the medic, seeing intelligence in his eyes she did not bother pretending not to notice, said softly, "Stay then. Just don't touch the line." He stayed exactly there, muzzle inches from the girl's wrist, as if his watch had not ended even now. Through the window of the trauma room the soldier saw the county emergency director being led past in cuffs. He looked smaller without the parka. The man in black was wheeled by on a gurney under guard, arm bandaged, expression emptied at last of all cleverness. Behind them office workers cried, denied knowledge, blamed superiors, blamed storms, blamed fear. It no longer mattered in the same way. The old man sat on a hallway bench and answered investigators without sparing himself. Every date. Every system. Every omission. He spoke until his voice failed, then kept going in a rasp because some confessions must be carried the whole distance on foot. When at last there was a pause, the soldier sat beside him. The old man stared ahead at nothing and said, "I used to think guilt was punishment. Turns out it's just storage. Redemption is the expensive part." The soldier nodded once. There was nothing clever to say to that. Down in the dispatch basement, printers were still spitting pages into evidence bins. At the diner, they learned later, the waitress had poured hot coffee directly into the emergency director's deputy when he reached for his sidearm, and then locked 2 dispatch men in the freezer until state patrol arrived. The cook had stood at the back door with the meat cleaver anyway, because some people fight evil with whatever their hands already know. By afternoon the county roads were no longer closed by local authority. Real plows ran. State auditors descended. Reporters came. Families began arriving at the annex and courthouse with old missing person flyers curled from wallets and glove boxes, asking whether names on the broadcast lists were their own ghosts. Some got answers at once. Others got graves exhumed. Some got only the mercy of certainty after years of weather-shaped lies. The older sister sat beside the bed through all of it. She held the silver diner bell in one fist and her younger sister's fingers in the other, as if she could physically tether the girl to this side of the world. Near evening, after antibiotics took hold and the fever finally dipped from lethal to merely frightening, the younger sister opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the dog. Her cracked lips moved around a whisper. "Told you he'd come back." The older sister broke then in a way she had denied herself since childhood, folding over the bed rail, laughing and sobbing into the blanket, while the medic looked politely away. The soldier stepped back to the window and let the reunion belong to them. Outside, snow still fell over the town, but it no longer felt like a cover. It felt like cleansing. White over roofs. White over roads reopened for the first time under honest dispatch. White over the frozen ridge where the cheap cabin waited with its lifted floorboards and buried secrets no longer buried enough. In the days that followed, the story spread farther than anyone in the valley imagined. Storm rescue became a phrase people no longer heard the same way. State teams excavated Station 4 beneath the cabin, Station 2 below the mission, and 2 other linked sites on county land and private holdings bought through shell corporations. Medical records were matched. Shell grants traced. Old grant committees investigated. The cabin itself was condemned and then preserved as evidence, though to the soldier it remained something stranger than either word, a place bought for escape that had become an entrance into other people's captivity. He returned there once under escort after the roads cleared, mostly because the dog insisted. The shepherd led him to the center of the floor where the hatch had first called attention to itself. There, under a loose board beside the cellar ring, investigators had missed one small object wrapped in wax cloth. A photograph. Faded. Creased. It showed the older and younger sisters years earlier on the mission church steps with the waitress behind them and a winter coat too large for the older one. On the back, in cramped handwriting, someone had written, "When the bell rings, run toward people who still choose to hear it." The soldier stared at the words for a long time. Then he folded the photograph carefully and carried it back to the annex. The old man never asked forgiveness, and in the end, that was why some version of it became possible. He testified, surrendered every key, every record, every hidden account number. He returned the mission maps to the sisters and spent his first free day after formal statements repairing the church bell line with new wire under state supervision, not because the bell needed fixing, but because memory does. The older sister watched him work from the steps and said nothing for a long while. At last she said, "You don't get to be what happened." He looked up slowly. She continued, "But you do get to decide what happens after." It was not absolution. It was harder than that. It was work. The younger sister recovered by increments, the way all real healing does. 2 steps, 1 collapse, then 3 more. Fever left. Weight returned. Nightmares did not leave so politely, but the dog seemed to understand those too. At the annex, then later at the mission house where the sisters chose to stay while the county cases unfolded, he would rise from sleep at exactly the moment a dream turned bad and place his head on the younger one's bed until her breathing steadied. He did the same for the soldier more than once. Some rescues do not end at the door. They continue in the dark where memory waits. As for the soldier, he did not vanish after the headlines faded. That was perhaps the truest sign of his change. He had gone to the mountain to be alone with his dog and his scars and the quiet punishment of surviving. Instead, he found a county that had converted blizzards into cover for the disposable, 2 girls who had taught themselves to fight an institution with bells and maps and memory, a waitress who had held the line with coffee and courage, and an old man who learned too late that guilt must eventually become action or it rots into another form of cowardice. The dog had found the hatch beneath the floor, yes, but what he had really found was the place where one man's retreat ended and his responsibility began. By spring, when snow water ran loud under the mission bridge and the churchyard pushed up new grass through thawing ground, the mission itself had become something different. Not a hidden station. Not a watch post. A real refuge. State grants, community donations, and the waitress's furious organizing rebuilt it into a legitimate storm shelter with transparent records, open radios, and a bell rope hanging once more from the tower where anyone could see it. The older sister ran communications. The younger helped catalog recovered names and personal items for families who came seeking pieces of the lost. The old man kept the generators alive and the drainage clear. The soldier repaired roofs, chopped wood, trained volunteers on winter search patterns that saved lives instead of stealing them. And the German shepherd? He moved through all of it like a quiet oath fulfilled, checking doors, standing watch beside cots during blizzards, finding frightened children before anyone else heard them cry, and sleeping each night not in a rented room staring into corners at 317, but by the mission stove where the bell rope swayed slightly overhead whenever the wind changed. Some evenings, when the valley went blue with dusk and weather rolled in over the ridges, the soldier would stand outside the old church and listen to the honest sounds of the place. Real radios, real volunteers, plows starting on time, trucks checked in on roads that remained open as long as they safely could. Sometimes the bell would ring once when no one touched it, moved by wind or memory or some private grace the mountain kept for itself. And each time it did, the dog would lift his head, the younger sister would smile, the older one would look out over the road as if expecting someone else lost to appear from the snow, and the soldier would feel, maybe for the first time since the war, that survival had stopped being a debt and become a duty worth waking for. Because the truth was never that he bought a frozen cabin for $300. The truth was that winter led him to a locked hatch, a dog refused to look away, and beneath the floor of a forgotten place they found not only evil hidden in the dark, but the narrow passage through which hope could still climb back into the light.